You are standing at the base of a mountain. The air is cold. The sky is still dark. Above you, thousands are already moving, step by step, straining, pulling, lifting. Stones. Stones so massive they should never move. No machines, no engines, no technology you would recognize. And yet, the mountain is changing. A structure is rising, not just built to stand, but built to be seen, to be remembered, to reach beyond this world. Men shout orders into the dark. Ropes tighten. Wood creaks under impossible weight. Dust fills the air as stone grinds against stone. You feel the ground tremble beneath your feet. They believe this place will bring heaven down to earth. They believe God himself will dwell here. And so they climb, again and again, carrying what no one should be able to carry. But here is the question no one dares to ask. What if it was never meant to last? What if every stone, every sacrifice, every step up this mountain was pointing to something else? Something no one standing here can yet see. Long before the mountain began to rise, there was already a temple. It stood at the center of the city, modest, worn by time, familiar to generations who had come and gone. People traveled from distant lands to stand within its courts, to pray, to offer sacrifice, to seek forgiveness. But those who remembered the past saw something different. They remembered a glory that no longer existed. They remembered a house of God that once shimmered with unmatched beauty, built by a king whose wisdom was spoken of across nations. They remembered walls that seemed to hold the presence of heaven itself. And when they looked at what stood now, they wept. Not because it was empty, but because it was not the same. The stones were smaller. The design was simpler. The presence felt distant, as though something sacred had been lost and could not be recovered. For generations, the people lived with that quiet disappointment. They worshipped, but they remembered. They gathered, but they compared. Every festival, every prayer, every offering carried with it a silent question. Could what was lost ever be restored? Or was this all that remained? A shadow of something greater, a reminder of what once was, but would never be again. And into that longing, into that quiet ache for something more, a new ruler stepped forward, not born from their traditions, not shaped by their history, but determined to change everything. His name was Azrael. He wore the crown, he commanded the armies, he controlled the city, but he was not truly accepted. To the people, he was an outsider. His bloodline traced back to nations that had once stood against them. His customs felt foreign. His authority, though enforced, never fully settled into the hearts of those he ruled. They obeyed him, but they did not trust him. They listened, but they questioned. Every decision he made carried a shadow. Every decree was weighed against a single, unspoken doubt. Was he truly one of them? Or was he a ruler placed over them, rather than raised from among them? Azrael understood this. He understood power, but more importantly, he understood perception. He had seen how empires were built, not only with armies, but with symbols, with monuments, with acts so grand they could not be ignored. If he could not inherit their trust, he would construct it, stone by stone. He would give them something they could not deny, something so magnificent, so overwhelming, that it would silence every question about who he was and why he ruled. He would not argue for his legitimacy. He would build it, and in doing so, he believed he could secure his place in history. A king remembered not for where he came from, but for what he created. But what Azrael did not understand was this. The greater his ambition became, the less control he would have over what it truly meant. Because the mountain he was about to reshape would not only change his legacy, it would change everything. The announcement came suddenly. Azrael gathered the people and spoke with confidence, his voice carrying across the crowd as he revealed what he intended to do. The temple, he said, was not enough. It stood, yes, it functioned, it held their rituals and their prayers, but it did not reflect the greatness of their past, nor the future he believed they deserved. It would be rebuilt, not repaired, not expanded. Rebuilt, larger than anything that had stood before it, higher, wider, stronger, a sanctuary that would eclipse memory itself. He spoke of restoring glory, of honoring the God they worshipped, of giving the people a house worthy of divine presence. But beneath his words was something deeper, something everyone could feel, even if no one said it aloud. This was not only about God, this was about him, about proving, once and for all, that he belonged, that he was not an outsider, but a king chosen to lead them into something greater. The scale of what he proposed was almost impossible to comprehend. An entire mountain reshaped, a platform carved out of uneven ground, stones so massive they would challenge the limits of human strength. Thousands of workers, years of labor, resources drawn from across the region. It would transform the city itself. Economies would shift, lives would be consumed by the work, generations would grow up in the shadow of construction. And yet, the people listened. Some were inspired, some were skeptical, many were simply unsure. But one thing was certain: if Azrael succeeded, no one would ever question his place again. And if he failed, everything he had built, including his own authority, would collapse with it. What Azrael could see was a future shaped by his own ambition. What he could not see was a purpose far beyond it. To him, this was a project of power, a declaration carved into stone, a way to secure loyalty, to silence doubt, to write his name into the memory of a people who had never fully embraced him. But something else was already unfolding, quietly, unseen. The mountain he planned to reshape was not just a foundation for his legacy. It was becoming a stage, a place where, one day, voices would speak words no king could command, where authority would not come from crowns or armies, but from something far greater. Azrael believed he was building a house for God, but he did not realize that the story of that house had already been written. Every measurement, every stone, every decision would contribute to something he did not intend and could not control. The workers would think they were building for a king. The priests would believe they were preserving what was sacred. The people would see a restoration of glory. But beneath it all, beyond every visible purpose, a different meaning was taking shape. One that would not be revealed through construction, but through what would happen inside those walls. Because the mountain was not the destination, it was preparation, and the structure rising from it would one day hold moments that would change not just a nation, but the course of history itself. Azrael thought he was creating something permanent, but what he was truly building was temporary. A sign, pointing forward, waiting for something greater to arrive. The first problem was the mountain itself. It was not built to hold what Azrael imagined. The ridge was uneven, jagged, broken by natural slopes that fell away too sharply on every side. There was no space for a structure of the size he envisioned. No foundation strong enough, no surface wide enough. To build what he wanted, the mountain would have to be changed, not adjusted, rebuilt. Engineers stood where you once stood, looking up, measuring distances that did not yet exist. They calculated weight, pressure, angles of collapse. Every answer led to the same conclusion. It could not be done. Not with the tools they had, not with the time they were given, not without risking everything. And yet, the order did not change. So they did something no one had attempted before. They decided to build the ground itself. Massive retaining walls began to rise from the base of the mountain, extending outward into the empty space where nothing had stood before. Stone was laid upon stone, each block cut with precision, fitted so tightly that no mortar was needed to hold them together. Course after course, the walls climbed higher. In some places, they rose more than 100 feet above their foundations, holding back not only the weight of stone, but the pressure of an entire artificial platform that would soon fill the space behind them. But they did not stack the stones straight. Each layer was set slightly back from the one below it, creating a subtle inward slope. A design so small it could be missed by the eye, yet powerful enough to resist the immense force pushing against it. It was a solution that would allow the structure to stand for generations, even through earthquakes, even through time. Behind those walls, workers poured in earth, rubble, and carved stone, filling the empty valleys until the mountain was no longer what it had been. It became something new, a level expanse, vast and unnatural, suspended above the ground that once defined it. But the walls alone were not enough. Beneath the surface, hidden from view, arches and vaulted chambers were constructed to distribute the weight. Networks of stone corridors stretched beneath the platform, carrying the load across multiple points so that no single section would collapse under pressure. It was an unseen world beneath the visible one, a foundation no one would come to admire. Yet without it, everything above would fail. Water systems were carved into the design, channels and reservoirs that would sustain the structure and the people who would one day gather there. Every detail was calculated, every risk considered, and still, one question remained. Even if they could build the mountain, how would they move the stones? The stones were the next problem. Not ordinary stones, but blocks so large they defied reason. Some stretched longer than a house, others stood taller than a man. and the largest among them weighed more than anything a human workforce should have been able to move. Yet they were not scattered across the land. They were cut with intention, quarried from bedrock with a precision that suggests planning far beyond brute force. Workers carved channels into the stone, driving dry wooden beams deep into the cuts. Then they poured water over the wood. Slowly, almost silently, the wood expanded. Pressure built within the rock, until the stone split cleanly along its natural lines. No explosion, no iron machine, just patience, knowledge, and control. But cutting the stone was only the beginning. Moving it was something else entirely. Teams of workers surrounded each block, guiding it onto wooden rollers. Thick ropes were fastened around the stone, pulled by lines of men and animals working in unison. The ground beneath had to be prepared, leveled, reinforced, or the weight would sink into the earth before it ever reached its destination. Every movement required coordination. Every mistake carried consequences. If a stone shifted too quickly, it could crush those guiding it. If the ground failed, weeks of labor could be lost in an instant. So they moved slowly, deliberately, sometimes only a few feet in an entire day, up slopes that resisted them, across paths that had to be built as they advanced. And still, they kept going. For the largest stones, the challenge grew even greater. They had to be lifted, raised into position along the rising walls, placed with a level of precision that left no space between them. No mortar would fill the gaps. The stones had to fit perfectly on their own. Some believe they used systems of counterweights and lifting frames. Others suggest ramps, extended gradually as the walls grew higher. But no explanation fully accounts for what stands even now. Blocks aligned so tightly that a blade cannot pass between them. Surfaces cut so cleanly they appear almost finished by tools that did not exist. Even today, those who study these stones cannot fully agree on how they were moved, how they were lifted, or how they were placed. And yet, they are there, silent, immovable, proof that something happened on that mountain that still challenges understanding. Stone by stone, the structure rose. Not quickly, not easily, but with a determination that refused to stop. By the time the structure was complete, the mountain no longer felt like a mountain. It felt like a destination. People came from far beyond the city, from distant regions, across dry plains and narrow roads, drawn by something they had only heard about. 3 times each year, the roads filled with travelers, families, merchants, pilgrims, all moving toward the same place. But no one walked straight to the sanctuary. There was a beginning. At the base of the ascent, water waited, cold, still, collected in carved basins where stone met earth. Before anyone could approach what stood above, they stepped down into that water. Slowly, deliberately, they washed, not for cleanliness, but for preparation. Because what waited above was not ordinary, and no one entered it unchanged. From there, the climb began. Steps cut into the stone, rising toward the gates. But something about them felt different. They were uneven, wide, then narrow, then wide again. A rhythm that interrupted movement. You could not rush. You could not take them 2 at a time. Every step forced you to slow down, to look up, to become aware of where you were going. The design itself controlled your pace. It prepared your mind before you ever reached the top. At the gates, the noise softened. Massive entrances opened into passageways beneath the platform. Stone corridors that pressed in around you, dimly lit, the air cooler, the sounds outside fading into something distant. For a moment, you walked in shadow, surrounded by the weight of the mountain above you. Then, slowly, the path began to rise. Light appeared ahead, at first faint, then stronger, until suddenly you stepped out, and everything changed. Light exploded across the surface before you. The sanctuary stood ahead, covered in gold that caught the sun and threw it back with blinding intensity. You could not look directly at it for long. It shone like fire. Every surface that was not gold was carved from stone so white it reflected the light like snow. From a distance, it did not look built. It looked as if it had always been there, as if the mountain itself had revealed it. Sound filled the air, voices layered upon voices, rising and falling in patterns of song and prayer. The sharp blast of horns cut through the noise at intervals, marking moments you did not fully understand but could feel. Movement surrounded you, priests in motion, offerings being carried, animals led toward sacrifice, smoke rising, curling into the sky above. The scent of incense mixed with everything else, thick in the air, impossible to ignore. and beneath your feet, the stone, smooth, solid, placed by hands that had labored for years to make this moment possible. You were no longer outside. You were inside something designed to affect you, to slow you down, to overwhelm you, to remind you that you were standing in a place where heaven and earth were meant to meet. And for many, standing there, it felt exactly like that. But not everyone saw it the same way. And one day, someone would walk into that space and see something entirely different. He did not arrive with an announcement, no procession, no signal that anything unusual was about to happen. He came the same way others did, on foot, through the same roads filled with travelers, up the same steps that forced every person to slow down, through the same gates, the same corridors, into the same light that revealed the sanctuary in all its brilliance. At first, he was just another face in the crowd, a man from a small town, known to a few, unnoticed by most. But it did not stay that way, because when he spoke, people stopped, not because of volume, but because of authority. He did not speak like the teachers they were used to hearing. He did not quote endlessly or build arguments from tradition. He spoke as if he understood something they did not, as if the place they stood in, the structure that surrounded them, meant something deeper than what they had always been told. And when he spoke about the house itself, he did not refer to it as theirs. He called it his Father's house, not a shared claim, a personal one. Those who heard it understood the weight of those words. He was not just teaching within the structure, he was redefining it. Day after day, he returned, teaching in open spaces where crowds gathered around him, speaking in areas where commerce and worship intersected, where movement never truly stopped. Some listened with curiosity, others with hope, and some with growing concern, because the more he spoke, the clearer it became. He was not simply another voice within the system. He was challenging it, not with force, but with truth that unsettled those who had built their authority within those walls. And the place that had been designed to inspire awe was becoming the setting for something far more disruptive. It happened in a place everyone passed through, not in the inner sanctuary, not in silence, but in the outer courts, where movement never stopped, where animals were bought and sold, where coins changed hands, where worship had become something managed, regulated, and priced. If you came from far away, you could not bring what you needed. You had to buy it there. Approved animals, approved currency, approved exchange. And every step of that process came with a cost, higher than it should have been, higher than many could afford. The system worked, but it worked against the people it was meant to serve. The poor paid more, the desperate had no choice, and all of it happened within sight of the place they believed God dwelled. He saw it, not as normal, not as necessary, but as something that had gone wrong. And this time, he did not simply speak. He acted. Tables overturned, coins scattered across stone floors, animals broke loose, pulled away from the control that had confined them. The sound changed instantly, from order to chaos, from routine to disruption. Voices rose, shouts echoed, movement became confusion. And at the center of it all, he stood, not out of control, but completely certain. He called it what it was. A place meant for prayer had become something else, something that no longer reflected its purpose. This was not anger without direction. It was a response to something that had been building for a long time. And in that moment, the structure that had been designed to inspire reverence was exposed, not in its beauty, but in its failure. It did not take long for the tension to rise. Those who had authority within the structure had been watching him closely, listening, measuring his words, observing the way people responded. What began as curiosity had become concern, and now, after what he had done, it became something else. A threat, not because he carried weapons, not because he commanded armies, but because he spoke with a certainty they could not control. And the people listened. They gathered closer, stayed longer, asked questions that reached beyond what they had always accepted. The leaders saw it happening, influence shifting, attention moving, and so they confronted him, not in anger alone, but with calculation. They pointed to the structure around them, to the stones that had taken decades to place, to the scale, the weight, the permanence of it all. Look at this, they implied. Look at what has been built. Who are you to challenge it? And that is when he said it. Not loudly, not dramatically, but clearly enough that those closest to him would never forget. These stones, he said, will not remain. Every layer, every wall, every part of what they believed could never be undone. It would all fall, not one stone left upon another. For a moment, the words did not register. They stood in a place that felt immovable, built from blocks too large to shift, fitted so precisely they seemed permanent. How could something like this be destroyed? The idea itself sounded impossible, but he did not explain. He did not defend the statement. He simply said it and left it there, a sentence that would linger, unanswered, unbelieved, and yet waiting. It did not happen immediately. The structure still stood. The crowd still gathered. The routines continued as they always had, but tension was building, beyond the mountain, beyond the city. For years, pressure had been growing between the people and the power that ruled over them. Control tightened, resistance increased. Small conflicts began to turn into something larger, until finally it broke. Armies approached, not as visitors, not as pilgrims, but as a force determined to end what stood there. The city was surrounded, supplies cut off, movement restricted. What had once been a place of gathering became a place of waiting, waiting for something no one could stop. Inside the walls, fear spread quickly. Food became scarce. Order began to collapse. What had once felt permanent now felt fragile. And then the assault began. Stone struck stone. Fire followed. The structure that had taken decades to build was now under attack. Not from within, but from the outside, where no one had imagined it could fall. Flames spread faster than expected. Across wood, across fabric, across everything that could burn. Heat intensified, rising beyond control. And then something unexpected happened. The gold, the same gold that had once reflected light across the mountain, began to melt. It ran down the surfaces, slipped into the spaces between the stones, deep into the cracks, and the soldiers saw it. Not the meaning, not the history, the value. So they began to take it apart, stone by stone, not because they wanted to destroy it, but because they wanted what was inside it. They pulled the structure apart to reach the gold that had settled between the layers. Every block removed, every section dismantled, until the impossible words spoken years before became reality. Not one stone left upon another. The mountain still stood, but what had been built upon it was gone. What remained was silence. Where there had once been movement, there was stillness. Where voices had risen in prayer, there was nothing but the sound of wind moving across broken stone. The place that had drawn people from across the world was no longer a destination. It was a memory. Fragments of walls stood where they could. Sections of foundation remained, holding their place not because they were meant to survive, but because there was nothing left to take from them. Everything else had been removed. Not carefully, not respectfully, but completely. For those who had lived their lives around that structure, the loss was more than physical. It changed everything. The system they had known no longer existed. The rhythms of worship, the patterns of sacrifice, the roles that had defined their identity, all had to be reimagined. Without the structure, they had to find a new way forward. Some turned inward, gathering in smaller spaces, replacing what had been centralized with something more dispersed. Others looked back, trying to understand how something so significant could disappear so completely. And then there were those who remembered his words. Not one stone left upon another. What had once sounded impossible now felt undeniable, but his words had not ended there. Because he had not only spoken of destruction, he had pointed to something else. Something that did not depend on stone. Something that could not be burned, dismantled, or taken apart. The structure had fallen, but the meaning behind it had not. In fact, it was becoming clearer. What had been built on the mountain was never meant to last forever. It was meant to point beyond itself, to prepare people for something they could not yet fully understand. And now, with the structure gone, that understanding was beginning to take shape. The mountain had never been the destination. It had always been a sign. Every stone that was cut, every wall that was raised, every step that led upward had pointed towards something beyond itself. But while the structure stood, it was easy to mistake the symbol for the reality. To believe that the presence of God was confined to a place, that access required distance, effort, and ascent. That holiness was something you approached from the outside. But that was never the full story, because even while the structure stood, he had already begun to shift the focus. Not away from what the people believed, but deeper into what it meant. He spoke of a temple that could be destroyed and raised again in 3 days. Not built from stone, not supported by walls or foundations, but something living, something that could not be confined to a single location. At the time, Those who heard him did not understand. They looked around at the massive structure, at the weight of the stones, at the scale of what had taken decades to build, and they assumed he was speaking about what they could see. But he was not. He was speaking about himself, about a reality that would not be tied to a mountain or a city, a place where the presence of God would no longer be approached from a distance, but experienced directly, not through systems, not through structures, but through something personal. And when the mountain fell, when the stones were removed, when everything that once defined that place disappeared, the shift became undeniable. The symbol had done its work. It had pointed forward, and now what it pointed to remained, unshaken, uncontained, not built by human hands, and no longer limited to a single place on earth. Today, the mountain still stands, not as it once was, but as a reminder. Fragments remain, stones that were never moved, foundations that refuse to disappear. People still come. They stand where others once stood. They touch what remains. They remember what used to rise above it. But the meaning of that place is no longer found in what was built there. It is found in what it pointed to. Because the true dwelling place of God was never meant to remain on a mountain. It was meant to move, to reach beyond stone and structure, to exist where no fire could destroy it and no force could dismantle it. And that changes everything. So the question is not what once stood there. The question is what stands now. What amazed you more, the stones they moved, or the truth they revealed?